Welcome to the Cis Spotlight podcast, where we're shining a light on the transformative world of women's health. Each episode brings you candid conversations with the changemakers who are truly moving the needle in our women's health. Our guests span the entire innovation spectrum. You'll hear from entrepreneurs with fresh ideas, scientists making breakthrough discoveries, investors backing bold visions, and corporate leaders driving institutional change. We'll dig deep into the problems they're solving, the innovations that they are developing, and the valuable lessons they've learned along the way. Join us as we explore how bold leaders, cutting-edge science, and transformative technology are writing the next chapter in women's health. Together, we're building a future where generations of women can truly thrive. Welcome to the Cis Spotlight podcast. Today is our first show, and I am privileged to welcome Dr. Sioned Fôn Jones, COO and founder of BoobyBiome. Now, I heard you pitch, just for a few minutes at Cis Women's Health event last year. And what I took from that is BoobyBiome is at the forefront of breast milk microbiome, so not just any microbiome research, and it's really about championing infant health through, at the time when I heard you talk, jaw-dropping, groundbreaking science. And what I hope to learn more about today is products as well. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction as well.
Did I get it right?
You did. It's great to be here.
Because I remember when you got off stage, my jaw was on the ground, and the biggest takeaway for me was I'm throwing every probiotic out the window. But before we get into that detail, and for the listeners who are listening in, what is a microbiome, and what is a breast milk microbiome?
So when we talk about the microbiome, it really doesn't have to be complicated. It's essentially just a community of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live on and in us. And we have these microbiomes everywhere. They're in our guts, they're on our skin, and they're even in our breast milk. And it's really interesting because for so long we thought bacteria is something we should eliminate. We should wash our hands, we should use antibiotics to kill them. But really, bacteria is essential to our biology. And that's because bacteria can be both harmful but also beneficial. And in a healthy microbiome, these will coexist in a balance, where the beneficial bacteria will protect us from the harmful bacteria, and they will support our immune system. But what happens is, in some cases, we have disruptions, and the pathogenic bacteria essentially take over that ecosystem. And this is something that we call dysbiosis, which is related to inflammation and disease. Now, if we apply this context to infancy, it becomes even more fascinating, because right up until the point you are born, your microbiome is a blank slate. It's just waiting to be seeded with bacteria. And that microbiome will continue to develop for the first 2 years of life. And these bacteria come from all sorts of places, skin-to-skin contact, from our home, from our pets. But the key driver is breast milk. And that's because breast milk hosts this community of bacteria, thousands of them. And they are beneficial bacteria that once they arrive to the infant gut, they can train that very first infant immune system. And the impact of that is remarkable because babies that are breastfed are less likely to have asthma, allergies, diabetes, eczema, even childhood leukemia, which are all diseases that are related to that microbial disruption in early life.
So let's say I'm a vintage breastfeeder. There's two sides to the story if we go back maybe a decade and we look into the future. So where I am in my life now, menopausal, we hear a lot about microbiome. It almost feels like a little bit of an overwhelming trend to try and have to go back and fix what clearly I have neglected. But when I think back to when I was a mum and breastfeeding, there was a lot of pressure to breastfeed. What is that first milk called when you feed your baby? Colostrum. And so having been a breastfed baby myself, and having been really told that if we give them colostrum, we set up their immune system, really well to start with, which is essentially what you're saying.
Exactly.
But a lot of pressure, a lot of societal pressure. One is my daughter was prem Then I ran dry through stress, so I couldn't. So there was a time where I wanted to, then I didn't want to, and then I couldn't. Are we seeing, what are the statistics looking like for breastfeeding if we're saying breast milk is essential for babies now, next and future, right?
So if we think back over the last century, we've seen this huge decline in breastfeeding rates globally. And if we think back to the 1900s, the early 1900s, breastfeeding was the absolute norm. It's what everyone did. But by the mid-1900s, we saw this huge rise in aggressive formula milk marketing. We saw women entering the workforce without adequate support. We saw a rise in urbanisation. And all of these have led to a significant decline in breastfeeding rates. And that is correlated to an increase in all of these diseases that I've just mentioned, asthma, diabetes, childhood leukemia, that we know that are related to a lack of breastfeeding. But today, there has been a renewed push to encourage breastfeeding amongst mothers. And that is really reflected in the statistics if you look at the last decade. So there's been a 10% increase in the number of babies that are breastfed exclusively under 6 months. And that number stands at 48% as of 2023. That is encouraging.
Yeah.
However, if we think about it from the other side of the coin, that means that more than half of infants worldwide are not being exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life. But the reasons behind those statistics are complex, and maybe that's something that we could get into a little bit later. But rather than thinking about the negatives here, we should really think hopefully. And what the World Health Organization have estimated is that if we can get that number from 48% to between 60 to 80% by 2030, we would be saving 200,000 lives of children under the age of 5. And so breastfeeding is important, but we need for there to be support for parents to really help them on that journey and allow them to make informed decisions for what is right for them.
Yeah. Let's just go. I want to drop that number again because it's mammoth, but when you look at it in the future, what you're saying now is that your impact for the now, the next, and the future generations is we take care of our children now. And this boosts their immune systems. You know, we live in a world where it feels like there's this constant narrative around how we are poisoning our children, whether it's pesticides or whether it's preservatives. So we really need to get in from the get-go. Is that why you started BoobyBiome for the world?
Exactly. So we started BoobyBiome for the world because there are millions of babies out there who are missing out on the benefits of breast milk bacteria. And how do we solve that? In an ideal world, we would pour all of our money and resources into ensuring that every baby is breastfed. But that's not realistic. Because what about the mother who has just given birth by C-section and her milk hasn't come in? The mother who has postpartum depression and the stress is impacting her milk supply? The parents who welcome their children to the world through surrogacy or adoption, or simply the mother who just chooses not to breastfeed. And so that made us wonder, well, how do we deliver the benefits of breast milk bacteria to every baby? And so the idea really crystallised when myself and my co-founders, Dr. 𝗪𝗵𝗁 and Dr. 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗲𝗃, looked at the available research. What does this breast milk microbiome do? And to no surprise, very little research had been done, which is always the case if it's anything related to a woman. That being said, there had been key studies conducted by fantastic scientists, Professor Lindsay Hall, Christopher Stewart, Megan Azad, just to name a few. Those studies allowed us to ask bigger pictures. Okay, we know-ish what's living in the breast milk microbiome, but what are the specific strains? How do they function? What happens if we put them together in a community, in a microbiome? How do they deliver these health benefits? It was really more than setting up a biotech startup. It was a mission to tackle one of the largest global health inequalities and create a future where every baby has the healthiest start in life.
So not just saving lives, saving generations.
Generations
making
to
them
come.
stronger.
Exactly.
I mean, impressive and just awe-inspiring. But can I just go back a second? How you are a scientist, and this I know. How does 3 scientists accidentally or on purpose discover breast milk microbiome while in the lab? Is that something you geared your mind to, or was it? Did you start? So how did you start from solving a problem? Did you start with children and immune systems and then work your way back on the innovation? Or how did that start? I can just imagine all 3 of you sitting in the lab being very sciencey, literally changing the world. And I'm just trying to figure out how did you end up on breast milk?
So we were actually doing our PhDs when we set up BoobyBiome. So to be truthful, it was a bit of a side hustle. We were doing a few accelerator competitions here or there, trying to understand how on earth do we set up a company? We had no idea. And there was a moment in one accelerator where we set up an Instagram page and a few photos on the grid. What is a microbiome? Does anyone want to donate their breast milk? And ultimately the vision of what we wanted to create. And overnight we had so many messages coming into this account. Not just people saying, hey, I'm breastfeeding, I'll give you some. But more people sharing personal stories on the experience that they had, almost feeling desperate for a product like this to exist. And that was the point where I thought to myself, right, we're really going to do this. And so how does it actually work in the lab, I guess, is the next question. Well, when we look at the data that's available at the time anyway, and this is in 2019, the field was still emerging. So we had an idea of what species were living in breast milk, but we didn't know the specifics. And that's important because when it comes to talking about health benefits of bacteria, they are strain specific. Again, what that means is there can be a species of bacteria that we know that exists, but there could be 10 strains of that species. So if we don't know what the strains are, do we really know anything? And so what we did was we collected breast milk samples from lots of mothers, and we used a method called shotgun metagenomic sequencing. Now, this doesn't need to be
Say
difficult.
that again, because I got the first word.
Shotgun metagenomic sequencing. And this doesn't need to be difficult.
I love that. That's very sciencey.
Essentially, all this means is that we're uncovering everything that lives in the sample to strain level. So the bacteria, the viruses, the fungi, everything. And from that, we could map out everything that was living in there, how it changed from person to person. We then even collected the stool sample, the paired mother-infant stool sample. And we could understand not only what was living in breast milk, but which strains were actually colonizing the infant gut and doing something. And in doing that, we collected metadata from all of our donors. We could start to understand how things like a C-section birth, diet, ethnicity, geography can all impact this developing microbiome. And really, that was the first step. And it was really exciting. But we then asked ourselves, well, we now know what's living in there, but what does it do? And really, to answer that question, we had to start growing things from bacteria. And trust me, it's not easy. Breast milk is a nightmare to work with.
I mean, personally, I can tell you, yes, it is. It's not necessarily always something you can take to Starbucks when you have a baby latched to you. So let me just get this right. Your scientific side hustle that is now set to pretty much save the world, change the world, and make the future generations stronger. I can only imagine a day in the lab with yourself and your founders. But let me shift the coin or shift the perspective. As a mother who did breastfeed, the one thing that stands out for me on BoobyBiome is that you are there to support us irrespective of how my baby is fed. But what does BoobyBiome, or is BoobyBiome going to look like? So as far as the product and the innovation is concerned, where are you on the journey? Are you launching? Is this something I can pick up at Boots? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So first of all, where are you on your journey of innovation? Are you still in production? Are you still testing? Is there a product coming out? From a mum and from someone who has a community of friends who are having babies, what does this product look like and feel like? Is this something I can tell them to pick up at their pharmacy? Is it a patch? Is it going to be a powder? What does that look like that I am so excited to be able to tell those closest to me or those who are having a baby? If you choose to breastfeed, yes or no, this is something that you need to incorporate in your infant's health.
So we are still in research and development at the moment, but the products that we are developing cater to every single parent, no matter what their feeding journey is. If they're breastfeeding, if they're pumping, if they're formula feeding.
I love that.
A combination
take away the
of
societal pressures. Yes.
Exactly.
Well done.
And so the first product that we're bringing to market was an absolute accidental discovery that we made. And so when we were collecting all these breast milk samples, we would be studying the microbiome, as I've mentioned, and we realised that those milk samples that had been pumped or those milk samples that had been stored didn't have the same microbiome than what it did if it was just naturally expressed and studied straight away. And that's when we realised that these beneficial bacteria that live in the breast milk microbiome are anaerobic. They're really sensitive to oxygen.
What does that mean?
Really sensitive to oxygen.
Okay.
And so once they are exposed to the air, they essentially die. Huh. And when we realised this, we looked at the literature again and we realised that bottle-fed babies, breast milk bottle-fed babies, are more likely to have asthma, more likely to have obesity and respiratory infections, which are all diseases that are associated with a suboptimal microbiome development. And so when we realised this, we went on another side quest and we developed a device. And that device can mimic the conditions of inside the breasts and inside the gut, which is a low oxygen environment, to keep and preserve the microbiome during storage. Okay. And so this device is, imagine an accessory that you can add to your infant feeding bottle. It's universal with all of them. And by using it, we can preserve the microbiome, we can preserve the antioxidants, and we can even extend the shelf life of breast milk. But as I said, this was an accidental discovery and not what we set out to do. Okay. And really what we've been doing for the last 5 years is find a solution to babies that have no access to breast milk bacteria at all. So those babies who are formula fed. And so the product that we're developing for them is, imagine a live microbiome drop that contains all of the bacteria that we'd naturally find in breast milk, so that we can add it to formula milk so that it would still be delivered to those babies. And what I believe to be the most fascinating part of what we're doing is all of these strains have been isolated from breast milk samples of women who have donated to our study. And these bacteria have been rationally engineered to be in a whole community to really mimic the ecosystem of breast milk. And every single strain has been chosen based on its function. So reducing inflammation, maintaining the gut integrity, the ability to fight pathogenic infections. Wow. And so where we are in terms of that journey, as you can imagine, Dom, it's not very straightforward.
No, I can imagine it's not.
To develop. And so we have another 2 years of development before this product will be available. And we hope that it will be something that can be picked up in Boots or in pharmacies, even over the counter and prescribed. But at the moment, there's a lot that we want to do to ensure that the science is robust. We want to have human studies. We don't want to fall into the category of other products that are not clinically efficacious. And so for us, it's important to have the science right to have the biggest impact.
I mean, what I love the most is you've got technology that's coming in that's really preserving, and then potentially something that feels like as simple as when I put my vitamin D drop in my water or in my coffee. Probably shouldn't be doing that. And also that it's not a pill that as a mum I have to take and am responsible for, but it is something that I can really supplement and help my infant directly. And I think because we live in an age, again, we're here talking about women's health, and we started infant and we carry on way past the menopause. Just by the way, we don't disappear off the face of the earth. But it feels also like we're living in an age where we have to pop a pill for everything. Exactly. Or there's a supplement for something that's dealing with our life stages. And so the idea that it's something as simple but so powerful that I can give directly to a child or my child. It's just, I did say it, groundbreaking. It really is. Jaw-dropping, like absolutely. And I know that anyone listening, whether you are an investor, whether you are a mum, or whether you are a mum and an investor or a founder, everyone's going to want to get their hands on a BoobyBiome because everybody wants to give their children the best start to life.
Exactly.
And can I just ask a question on microbiome? This science, this industry, is it a regulated industry?
That is a great question, Dom, and I could speak about this for hours, so I'll try and keep it short. But the thing is with microbiome, I often find the word has been stolen from the scientific community.
Okay.
And now we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it on shampoo bottles. We're seeing so much marketing fluff out there. And that is a problem. It's really difficult to distinguish between the real microbiome science and the marketing fluff. And then when it comes to the products that are being developed, products that we can pick up in shops, it's a poorly regulated space.
Okay.
You can put something on the market showing it's safe, but it doesn't have to have any clinical efficacy whatsoever. And so an example of that is in Europe, probiotics are regulated as food products. And so we can apply to EFSA, which is the regulated body, for what we call a health claim, which basically shows, does your product actually have a health benefit? And hundreds of companies have applied for their products to have a health claim. And none of them, apart from one, have passed to have a health claim on their product. And that goes to show how unregulated this space is. Yeah. And that's why it's been so important for us to really invest time and money into the science, into the computational modelling, into the gut cell modelling, before we even get to human testing, to de-risk that, to ensure that we know the mechanism of action and how our product works before actually just giving it to a baby or a human.
And we see that often in innovation. Accessibility becomes a priority before credibility. And, you know, I have said this before, and we all know that we're not a niche industry, but we are new when it comes to research and it comes to historical data. Innovation, as you know all too well, does not just happen on its own, right? From an industry perspective, whether you are industry-related, product-related, a founder, 3 things helps us get to market: education, innovation, which we have gone into, and investment. So let's talk about, nothing happens without money, right? So let's talk the sexy. Let's talk about investment. And before I ask you this question, I think I have to congratulate you, because hot off the pitch for CIS Women's Health last year in October, I believe you closed fundraising. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dom. We have Nathan from CIS to thanks for that.
Thank you, Nathan. Fundraising.
Where to start?
I was going to say fundraising is a bitch, but we might need to edit that. Fundraising is difficult. It's a challenge for anybody in any industry. How is yours going?
We all know the statistics of how little VC money go into female-founded companies, and we don't need to talk about that. I'm not sure about you, Dom, but I am bored of listening to the same statistics. But what I will say is that we have been really lucky to have really supportive investors along our journey, and not just your VCs and your investors, but also grant funding. We won 6 Innovate UK grants that totaled 2.6 million, which means that most of our money has been grant funded, not equity VC funded. But that being said, in 2022, we did a pre-seed round, which was led by 𝗪𝗏 and had participant from various angels, EIS fund, etc. And so it's been great to have them on board, but I'm finding there to be a change in the market now. We closed a match funding fundraise off the back of the CIS event, which is brilliant, and there'll be an announcement on that soon. And now we are doing a seed round to launch the device to market and get our symbiotic, the microbiome product, to the point of clinical testing. And it can be difficult. sometimes I feel like not only am I pitching myself and my company, I am justifying the existence of an entire sector. And what makes it worse is I'm talking about breastfeeding. Sometimes I think to myself, listen, if you don't really get this, let me pitch this to your wife because she's probably going to get it.
Yeah.
And what makes it worse is, I mean, our name, BoobyBiome.
I love it. It's like the word bubbles. You can't say it angrily. It's great.
But our name can sometimes be an additional barrier, especially in the investor world. Some people might say that our name doesn't really reflect the science that's happening behind closed doors, and I respect each of those opinions. And I often find myself pulled in various directions trying to think about, well, what is the best name for what we're doing? But in reality, BoobyBiome is exactly what
it says on the tin.
What it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And also for me, normalizing the word boob and destigmatizing it is actually something I feel really passionate about. And if you speak to mothers, they use the word boob every other word. They've got milk spraying out everywhere. They don't care that it's called BoobyBiome.
Absolutely.
And those are the people that we're creating this product for at the end of the day. And so back to your question, yes, it can be challenging. But once you've found the right investor, and yes, they do exist, it makes it all worth that effort. And those are the kind of people that you want on your cap table, not investors that are investing in female founders for a PR checklist.
Of the three of you, who does the fundraising the most?
It's myself and Lydia that does most of the fundraising, and Tara's locked behind closed doors doing all the bioinformatics and doing all the fantastic science. But I would say it's a team effort, and it's always good to have multiple people on the call because, you know, everybody gets an off day and forgets something here or there. And so no, it's a journey, but we're getting there.
We are. I'm permanently rageful that we're not getting where we need to be. You said it earlier. We are held to different standards. Our industry is held to different standards, first of all, largely because we're new and there isn't benchmarks to go to. We're having to create the best practices as we go along. But also, majority of the innovators and founders and fierce leaders like yourself are female. And so we're held to different standards. And the statistics show that, whether it's money flow, support flow, information, data, research, whatever it might be. I'm a big believer in education and allyship. And it feels like now's the time and it sounds like this is exactly what you're doing. You create the allyship through education. And really what that means is making the problem that you're solving and the solution super relative and relatable, right? I said this before and I use this often. If someone told me to come and invest in a woo-woo valve for my Land Rover company, what is a woo-woo valve? And I don't even think a woo-woo valve exists. But my point is, it's not relevant to me and to my life. I don't understand the problem. I don't understand why I need to invest in this. Irrespective of gender, it's about allies, and we empower our allies to support us, to bring awareness to us as an industry and as founders, and also give us money flow. And the best way to do that, I find, is education. Myself, and I know many founders like yourself, when fundraising, spend a lot of time having to educate, and as you said, almost justify, but educate your industry, the problem, and the solution. Not everybody gets it. Not everybody fully understands. And some people just also don't care. And so we talk a lot, and there's a lot of people out there who are trying to help founders like yourself fundraise. What are the challenges, or shall I say, what are the learnings revealed to you that you would share to someone who's about to embark on fundraising?
So one of my biggest learnings is to find an army of female founders. And this is because people say that being a female founder is quite hard and it's difficult. But what people don't realize is that being a female founder comes with this entire army of people who have done it, who know the hurdles and want to help you clear them. And it's really interesting because I often find myself on an investment call, sitting on a podcast, on a panel, and I think to myself, how did I end up here? And 9 out of 10 of times I am there because another female founder has enabled that opportunity. And it's not that I don't deserve that opportunity, because I do, but sometimes all it takes for someone to say, hey, how about we invite her along to this event, or this introduction, or that recommendation? And there's really no support network quite like us. It's been one of the most important parts of my journey to get where BoobyBiome is where it is today. And even being sat on this sofa with you, Dom, I could give you a list of female founders that have just even enabled me to be sat here. And so my learnings would be find your army.
Find your tribe.
Find your tribe, show up for them and let them show up for you.
Yeah. And the show up is the really important bit, because I think how you show up, sharing the truths, being authentic, sharing the war stories, and also warning other female founders of which investment routes or houses not to go to. And we can all share war stories. In fact, I'm sure some of the stuff I could probably write a book about. But the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's really important that we do support each other, less posturing and more, this is one of the ways you want to go to. And also sharing of tips. So I think we might have even chatted about this once, where I spoke to a mentor before, and I said, if you have investors and you're busy investing, why don't you ask one of your investors to hold a coffee day or hold a drinks night and bring their tribe, finding your investor or your advisor that truly believes in you, being able to bring their community and their army so that you can write a check. And true to your success in cis women's health, a lot of founders will have their checks written when they are in a room educating the people in the room about the problem that they are solving and why they need to invest in, for example, BoobyBiome, as opposed to, the Zoom days.
Yes, exactly.
And there's just a big energy shift and a real importance. And I always say, and maybe you feel the same, if I can get in front of somebody and have this conversation, I'd rather do that. Even if I've got to walk to the coffee cart while I'm busy doing my 30-second pitch. But nothing speaks support and allyship like asking investors or your investors to bring along their army. And sometimes we don't ask. I think personally, as a female founder and an investor, I had to learn to ask, right? I was like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty common sense.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, pretty obvious. But I wasn't doing it.
And it's also asking even the ones that have rejected you, because the reasons that they could reject you is not because they don't support your company or like what you're doing. It could be literally due to, the mandate of that specific fund. And they will know all the other investors and what they're investing in. And so don't be afraid to ask, hey, can you pass my pitch deck to XYZ?
Yeah. It's the infamous no is not no, it's just not now.
Yeah.
Right. And you're very right. The market is changing. We chatted about it, and I always see success after education. And I think, again, I cannot bang home enough about it, because we just don't know. We just don't have the information. And I can imagine this question I'm going to ask you next. It could be lab orientated. It could be towards your personality, or maybe even working with your partners, your founders. What's the one thing that's really surprised you on your journey of BoobyBiome?
That's a great question.
Maybe it's something to do with humanity.
I guess what surprised me is that you are always learning, and it's also okay not to have all of the answers. And actually, if I look back, there's something so powerful about naivety. And I say sometimes, I'm going to emphasize sometimes, but really sometimes not understanding the scale of the challenge ahead can give you the courage to just go for it.
Yeah.
And if I think back to our early days, I had no idea how to set up a study. I had no idea how to recruit participants. I had no idea if anyone would even care. But you have to start somewhere. And so you start small. You don't make a plan that lasts you 6 months and you just go out and you do
Yeah.
it. And so we started small. We reached out to breastfeeding groups and saw an overwhelming willingness to support our work. And I guess what's surprising is you don't actually have to have all the answers. And the answer that you might have in 6 months' time is probably going to be 10 times better than the answer that you're trying to put together now. Now, this is obviously not the case in all scenarios.
Well, there's a difference between naivety and ignorance, right? And
Exactly.
I love the naivety because that's just a lovely sentiment because, again, if you don't know what you don't know, it just allows, I think, it breeds curiosity. And it sounds like your curiosity really got the better of you.
Exactly.
and worked out really well.
And it's the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I found that during my PhD. When you do a PhD, you become so niche in a very specific part of science that you open a can of worms and realize that there's more worms.
Yeah.
And so I think naivety can be really powerful. And I think right now, if I knew how difficult it would be to do a PhD and start up a company, would I do it?
Would you?
I would, but
Would you?
yeah, I would do it again.
Okay.
But maybe.
You're brave. and it shows because it's obviously been, and it is such a great success. The naivety bit, I love because it completely maybe cancels out my question. And I love to ask founders like yourself who have accomplished a lot together with their founders, but at the same time, if you had to write a letter to the you starting this out, like you said, a PhD and a company that's saving the future generation's health, what would you tell her? Or would you just give her a tip? Drink lots of coffee.
More water, less coffee.
More water, less coffee. Yeah.
I guess I would tell myself to, pardon the pun, but trust my gut instinct. It's interesting because it could be the people you hire, the investors you meet, the product developers that you plan to go with. Always trust that gut instinct. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, just trust it because it often materializes to be what you thought initially. I guess I would also tell myself to just enjoy the process. I found myself always wanting to get to the next point, get to the patent, get to the MVP, get to the Series A, rather than just enjoying where I am. And so
Dr. Jones, are we saying have some fun?
have some fun.
We do have a word we never hear in the world of sophisticated startups, right? Have fun.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Have fun. And celebrate all the tiny wins. You don't have to just celebrate when you get a 1.6 million Innovate UK grant. You can celebrate a successful isolation of a specific bacteria strain. Just celebrate
Okay, we'll leave
everything.
that bit to you. Yeah. I think that's really important. We do tend to constantly trying to hit the milestone, whether it's to, achieve something, hit a deadline, appease investors. You transition from justifying your business to almost defending your business.
Yeah.
And along the way, I think it's really important. And it's almost like we're too afraid to say, have some fun. We're not going to lose credibility. We're not going to lose authority or deliverables if you enjoy what it is that you do. And it feels like we might need that a little bit in the world. Speaking of the world, I'm planning on asking every guest this question. So hopefully not to put you on the spot alone. It also feels like women should be running the world just for a little bit.
I completely
with everything
agree.
that's going on, right? And if you were to run the world for a day and you could change one thing that would better support, and no, it can't be BoobyBiome, to support women better, to support the world. If you could change one thing, whether it's sociological, whether it's economic, what do you think? If you were in charge for a day and I said you could change any rule in the world, what would it be?
What a question, Dom. I would make every person on this world to view the world through a mother's eyes. And so we'd all be viewing each other as someone's son, someone's daughter. And I genuinely believe that there would be no neglect, no suffering, no war, because every interaction would be approached with that care and empathy that a mother instinctively have for their children.
Oh, Oh, that's gorgeous. So love and
Love.
nurturing.
Yeah,
We just have a kinder humanity.
exactly.
If everyone just had to drop everything and for a moment learn to see the world through mother's eyes, a mother's eyes, I think that's absolutely beautiful. If I want, and our listeners want to keep track of when your products are coming out and made available, ask you questions, really keep engaged, where do we find you? How do we get a hold of you?
You can find us at www.BoobyBiome.com, and we are also on Instagram, so at BoobyBiome, and also on LinkedIn. And our products should be coming out in 2025, so a very exciting year ahead. And if any of our listeners want to be part of beta testing of the device or want to sign up for the product waitlist, you can also find that on our website.
Or if you want to invest.
Also,
We
if you
get a
want
hold
to
of you
invest.
directly. Right, you heard it here.
Got to move quickly
Everybody
for that
get
one.
Get in touch. So if you loved hearing Dr. Sioned's inspiring story, imagine the insights waiting for you at our next CIS Women's Health event in New York this June. Founders like Dr. Sioned, who secured investment at CIS London, will be joining us with investors and pioneers to share lessons, groundbreaking ideas, and transformative opportunities. So if you're ready to take the stage, come and pitch your innovation at CIS Solve and compete for prizes up to $50,000, plus network, build partnerships, and drive change in women's health. Make sure you secure your spot now at www.cis.global.